Hey, welcome to our next movie here on Engineering 161. We're going to go over Chapter 1 tutorials. Those are the examples from the book that you need to do for homework, and also I'll look at any new techniques that you need to know about for homework problems. So, although you could follow along in the textbook and do this on your own without the movie, some of you may find that it's just going to be a lot easier to watch the movie. In any event, I've already created the velocity worksheet here before, so I've copied the worksheet. So sometimes when you're going to do a second worksheet that's almost identical to the first, you can come down here to the bottom, right click, and do what's called move copy. And if you click this box right here, create copy, then it will create a copy to the right before whatever sheet it shows up here. So I've created a copy, velocity 2, and then I deleted things so that I could just go over the important points here for you. All right, in any event, this top stuff in red, you always want to have your name on the top of every worksheet. I'd like you to also have the name of the worksheet. Remember, worksheets are what these tabs are down here, whereas a workbook is the entire file. Remember, for Chapter 1 and all subsequent chapters, you should have one workbook, in other words, one Excel file for all the homework problems in that chapter. That way, you and your instructor can easily access all these things, because most likely your instructor is going to be checking your work live during class. Okay, so let's go to velocity 2. In the book, this is starting on page 18. It's example 1-1. So anyway, I put my name up here. I just reminded myself this is going to go over examples 1-1, 1-2, 1-4, and a bunch of figures. So this is all just typing. Okay, there's nothing new here. The only thing I'm going to maybe point out is a lot of times when you put your units in a formula, you usually put them in parentheses. You don't have to, but it's just common. And I'll just add this quickly, hours. And if you want to, you change something in a cell, you just click on it and go up to this formula bar and do that. The other thing is, headings usually look better if they're centered. So I'm just going to go to the Home tab. So there's a center button right here. I click that, center it up. Also, not a bad idea, just maybe bold that heading. All right, so that looks nice. All right, so I typed in a 90, I typed in a 1.5. So one of the things we want to do is to calculate what the velocity is in miles per hour. All right, and that's going to be just the distance divided by the time. So remember, when you make a formula in Excel, just like we talked about on the previous movie, you start always with an equal sign. So I get the equal sign. Now, instead of typing in 90 divided by 1.5, and the reason we don't want to do this, okay, so if I did that, I'm going to get the right answer. But then what happens if I change this to 150? My answer is still locked to what it was before. So writing formulas that have constant numbers in them is usually a bad idea. The only constants we want to see if you're going to put a number, it'll be something like if a formula had a half or factor of 4 or something like that. So if you're doing, let's say, the area of a sphere, it'd be 4 pi r squared. So there you'd use a 4. But you don't want to do something like this and put bare, what I call naked numbers in there. So the better way is going to be, we're going to click on the cell B5, and then we're going to hit divide, and then we're going to do the C5, okay, and we'll click enter, and we get 100. Now, what's nice about this, the book wants us to use 90, so I can just put this 90. Notice that it updates to 60. The mark of a good spreadsheet is if you change any of the inputs, your answers will automatically change. All right, so that's the base column right there, and that gets you through page 18 and also 19. Alrighty, then it looks like we're typing in some more values here down the way. Now I can't do just a copy down because there's no regular order in any of these numbers, so I just quickly typed them in. And then the hours, just get down through here, 6, 3, 2, and 9. Okay, so I've got the base information in here. Now if you want to have the rest of these calculated, okay, one of the things that we've shown before in the first movie was you can go down to the right corner. Notice that there is a green square. So if you put the cursor over that, it becomes a black cross. You then left click and then you just drag down and it's going to copy the formula down. Now we're going to talk about this thing of relative versus absolute addressing. So let's talk about what relative addresses are. Okay, whenever you have B, like just the cell numbers B5 and C5, okay, this formula has the relative address means that this first one, B5, wherever we copy this formula, B5 or that first thing is always going to be something 2 squares to the left. Okay, and C5 is always going to be the cell 1 to the left. Okay, so as I click down to the next one, notice it's B6. That's something that's 2 squares to the left, and C6 is 1 square to the left. So as we copy down, relative addresses will update to the new things in those positions. Okay, first one is 2 to the left, second item is 1 to the left. So notice, let me get off of there. That's what happens. So B9 is, so all of these are always this distance divided by time. Now we're going to get into this a little bit more, but you can make an address absolute by a few different ways, and we'll get into that later. A lot of the times you will be just using relative addressing. Okay. All right, that pretty much gets us up through page 25. And then we get to example 1.4. And now it says we want to change the velocity to feet per second. All right. Now, instead of overwriting this data, let's just make another column. Now, what I can do is I can copy this stuff over and write and bring the fill handle over, and I get velocity miles per hour again. Okay, so if things are just text, if there's no equal sign, it'll just copy what's there just over again. So in this second one, I'm going to change this to feet per second, so FPS. Okay, so I have new units. All right, and the book wants us to put in a conversion factor. Okay, so the conversion factor is 1.467. Okay, so that's our conversion factor from feet per second to miles. Well, it's going to take miles per hour and get us to feet per second. All right. So to get this last column, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an equal sign. Okay. And then I'm going to click on the velocity in miles per hour. I'm deviating a little bit from what's in the book, but I like this better. So I'm going to take that value and I'm going to multiply by the conversion factor. Okay, and I'm going to get 88.2. Okay, and that's coming out slightly different from the book, which is 88.0. Now the reason is because it's the number of decimal points. Okay, you can change the number of decimal places real easy up here in this number bar. You can increase the decimals or you could decrease the decimals. So if I want to decrease it, I get the 88 If I don't want this bolded, I just take bold off. All right, so I get 88. Now, so all we're doing in this is converting from miles per hour to feet per second. Okay, and we're using this conversion factor B1. Now, it looks like we probably should be able to just copy this down. Uh-oh. What? It doesn't seem like it's working. Okay, so let's take a look. We have two relative addresses, D5, which is the thing to the left, and B1, which is way up here. So the first thing, D5, is a relative address that says use always the cell that's 1 to the left. B1, this one says use a cell that's 1, 2, 3, 3 to the left, and 1, 2, 3, 4 up. Okay? So watch, whoops, let's get off of that. Watch what happened on the second one. Now, the D6, it updated, it used the 1 to the left, but notice that the B1 changed to a B2 because it's, 3 over and 4 up. And the next one you can see, this one here, I'll click. Notice it's trying to use now a word. Okay, so if you want to use a cell, like it's this first one, this B1, we don't want B1 to change. We always want it to be B1. We have to change it from what's known as a relative address to a absolute address. So absolute address is one that is not going to change. Now, one way you can do that is by using dollar signs. Okay, so you could $sign the B. That would mean no matter what, the B is not going to change. And then you can $sign the 1. And you can use dollar signs for only the B or only for the number. But most situations, if you want to lock onto one cell, that's the safest way to do it. Okay, so if I did that and now copy this down, okay, oh, it looks like it's working because notice this first one, it's left 1 to the left, and this B1. The next one, if I click up in the name bar, notice it's still to the left. It still uses the conversion factor. So notice the B1 as we go down has not changed at all. That's called absolute. Now, instead of using the dollar signs, a better way to do that kind of formula is to use a named variable. All right. And so I'm going to come up here. Now we know there's a quick and dirty way of doing this. You click in here and I can just name the cell and hit enter. All right. But since I have another copy of this same sheet where I'm using conversion factor, and I don't want to get this conversion factor messed up with this one if I want to use the same name, the more elegant way to name a cell is to go up to the formula block and do name manager. Okay, and here now you can see I've got all kinds of things. Most of them have a scope of the whole workbook, but let's go new. So the name I'm going to use is feet per second per mile per hour. Okay. Now, if I'm ever going to use that again, I don't want to get it mixed up into other worksheets. I'm going to say the scope is just velocity too. So this feet per mile per hour, I'm only going to have it defined within this one sheet. I could use the same name in other sheets and it's not going to get confused with this one. All right, and I'm going to close that. So now I've got this new cell with a name. I come on over to here. Notice it still says B1. So what I can do is I can just highlight in the formula bar the B1, re-click on this. Notice it's called feet per second per mile per hour. Well, that's a mouthful. We put OK. And then I can just copy this down. None of these are going to change, but you can see now this is more readable. Instead of using conversion factor, someone can say, oh, I can see what they're doing now. They're taking the velocity and they're converting it to feet per second. Okay, so that gets us up through page 27, 29, and we wanted to continue this on. And now we're going to do some averages. Okay, So I'm going to come down here to cell 11 and I'm going to type the word average and I'll put a colon. Okay, so I want to get the average of all these things right here. Now what you don't want to do is get your calculator out and add these up and then divide by 5 and type in the answer here. Why? Because if any of these change, then your answer is no longer going to be correct. So let's figure out how to do an average. Okay. So first thing is I'm going to put equal, and notice up here there's an insert function. Okay, so let's just click on that and see what happens. And it comes up with a search function. So now I notice that there's some things that I've used more recently and it has average in here, but if you didn't know how to do an average, you could type in average here, put go, and it would find there's several averages, but we're just going to use the first one. You just put OK, all right, and now it kind of steps you through. It says, okay, what range of numbers do you want? Now right now it's guessing that I want B5 to B9. That's a pretty good guess. But let's say that it came up blank. Okay, so in this right here, you would just select the whole range. Now it'd say B5 to B9, and you'd be done. Okay. Now, if you get used to using Excel, okay, you might not want to go through this function thing, and you just want to do, you type it in. Okay, once you start typing, it gets smart. It says, okay, I'll do average. I double click, and then it just gives you the first parentheses. I can then do my range, and then I'll close the parentheses, and then I'll put OK. So I get an average of 100. Now, one of the things the book does is it wants to show you that you can name a range of cells like this, a name, just like you can name a single cell like we did up here. Okay, we can name a whole range of cells. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'm going to use the name manager, and we're going to call this distance. Okay, so distance. All right, I just want this to be the scope of velocity 2, so I put OK. And I close it. Notice I have a distance over here where I put a scope of just velocity, which was my original worksheet. All right, so velocity is there. Now, one of the things we can do now is I'm going to just click down on B11, go to this average, and this range right here. What I'm going to do is I'll just delete that, and let's see what happens when I click on all this. Oh, notice it says average of distance. Okay. It makes things a little bit more readable. Someone wants to look at this cell and says, oh, it's the average of the distance. The other item that they want us to do is the standard deviation. So I'll do STD, let's see, whoops, S. Usually you only want to capitalize the first letter, deviation. All right, so standard deviation. This is a measure of how much spread there is in the data. And once again, let's see what happens. I'm going to put equals, and let's say if I start typing standard. Now, there's lots of standard deviations here. The book wants us to use just this one right here, standard deviation. There's some for a population. It's a matter of using n or n-1 in the denominator someplace. But let's just choose the first one. So I double-clicked on it. Standard deviation. Now, I highlight this whole bit here. It says distance. I close the parentheses. I put OK. I get 26.2. All right. So these look real nice and readable. All right. Now I'm going to show you one of the downfalls of using an absolute address. Okay. So let's say I want to get the average for some reason of the time and all these other columns as well. Now, one of the things we can do is just highlight these two things, and we could copy these cells over. Oh, how come every one gives the same answer? because when you copy with a absolute address, either by using the dollar signs or using a named variable, that cell is locked. So all these are locked to this. So if you have lots of formulas that you want to, if you have columns like this, you might choose not to use the named variable. In which case, in this case, you're saying, well, how am I going to do that if I already have that named? Well, we could just overwrite it for now. We could just type in B5 to B9. Okay. And I'd still get the 100. And then the same thing here. Instead of this, I can't highlight now because highlighting is going to come up with the name distance. B5 to B9. Put OK. All right. Now, what's nice about this is these are relative addresses. This means to get this average, use the 5 cells directly above us. Well, not including this one right here. Okay. So now if I take these two and drag them across, you're going to see they all update to the proper thing. And that completes the first page 18 to 33, the velocity worksheet. So when you hand yours in, I mean, if you're following through in the book, your workbook's going to look something like this. If you followed along in the video, we're just going to have an extra column out here. Now, lastly, it's a nice idea to start getting into the habit of showing formulas that you're using. Okay, so over here, I'll say, okay, formulas. Okay, so I'm going to say, let's say column D. Okay, and I'm going to put the formula over here. Now, how to copy a formula? So I come here to this. I come up to the formula bar. I hit Control C, remember. Then I put OK, enter. Go to the cell I want to paste it in, and I'm going to put apostrophe, Control V. Okay, copies it over. So now someone can know, oh, column D, that's what they did. They used relative addressing. And below this, I'm going to put column E. Now for column E, I click on column E. I can click on either one of these. People get the idea. Copy, Control C, put OK, put the apostrophe, and put that there. And I usually like to bold the formulas. So I'm going to come to Home, just bold those. Lastly, we can do similar things down here. I'll quickly just say over here, I'm going to say row 11 because we used the same formula type in all these. I'm just going to take the first one, go Control C, put OK. And then row 12. Come over here. Do the apostrophe, Control, and bold those. So now you got a nice looking worksheet. Everything's nice and ordered. You have your name on there. You've used name cells. You have your formulas out here. Your instructor can quickly come through and say, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. So good job. The next video is going to be the one for date, and this is a pretty quick one, but we'll put some additional things on it. And that is on page 24 of the text. So we're actually going back a little bit. And it just shows you something different with Excel. So I'm going to come over here to the date worksheet, and what I'm going to do is just notice that up here at the top I've got my name and the name of the worksheet. I'm just going to put it in red. Okay, so you start out by just typing in Monday and 8 a.m. Okay. Now take a look. We could, if we're going to take this and let's see if what happens when we copy over. Okay, so we got the cross. Now Excel's smart enough to recognize that these are days of the week. All right. Now when you do it, your Wednesday is going to get cut off like this. You say, well, what can I do if things get cut off? Well, you can come up here to this bar. So you can either make the columns wider up here or narrower. So I can pull this out, Wednesday. Okay, another little trick is if you come up here where you get these double arrows left, right, and you do a double click, left double click, 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 it'll resize it just the right amount to fit things and look good. Okay, so that's all you have to do for that. Now down this way, so if I take this and pull it down, okay, go to 2 o'clock, and it knows that that's a time and it copies things like that. Now, just to do a little bit more in here, why don't you just like make up some things that you've got. Okay, so let's say you've got your engineering 161 here, but you also have it on Wednesday and Friday. So instead of typing things over again, you can click on it, do Control C, and then you can do Control V, Control V. Okay? Let's say that you got chemistry up here, chemistry 151. Okay. Now another thing you can do, I can do Control C. Okay. And then I can hit this one and do Control, and I can copy, or I can select two things at once and then do the Control V. All right. So there's lots of ways of doing the same thing. And let's see, maybe we're going to have math in there. Math 210. So let's do Control C and maybe have that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And let's just put in at 11 o'clock here, engineering 153. And you can do this for your own schedule. Okay? Control C, Control V. And maybe that's for a longer period of time. You can just drag it down. Now notice it's when it sees a number, it tries to update it. So we're just going to have to make sure that stays 153. All right. Let's see what happens. Let's say you have a chemistry lab Wednesday afternoon. I can take this, Control C, and let's say it's from 1 through 4. Okay, so I do that. I do Control V, and it'll have chemistry, and it'll put that into all the cells I highlighted. Okay, lastly, you want to make things look nice? Okay, we can use the fill, and maybe want to fill with a different color. Okay, so first thing off, let me just get into this cell. All right, so let's make chemistry that color. And now once you have something, then we can also put like a little box around it with borders. Okay, I'll put all border. Okay, so I've got this. Now what I can do is there's a thing called Format Painter. So once you got something the way you like it, you click on that cell, double click on Format Painter, click, click, and then you can just click on any other cell that you want. Okay. Now I can just come down here and highlight all that. It puts borders around everything. Maybe I didn't want that. And then you can just do the same kind of thing with these other courses. Okay, so I'm going to put, I can just put an outside border on. That's probably what I should have done in the first thing. Make a different color. Double click Format Painter. Bam, bam, bam. Okay, click again to get Format Painter off. And then I'll just throw another, maybe this is going to be a light red with a border. Double click Format. If you double click on Format Painter, it stays on until you click it off. If you, let's do one of these. Let's do an outside border and fill this with like a teal. Now if you just click once, it'll let you do one, and then Format Painter will already go off. So once you do something like that, where you put all your things in there, and if we want to, we could even put a box around the whole thing, and there's your schedule. Okay, so do something with colors there, make it look nice, and that would be your date. Okay. All right, so those are the two tutorials. The rest of these spreadsheets you will do on your own, but I'll just quickly run through them. The average, when you do the average, I don't want you typing in values. One way, the first average is just saying, you know, adding up each cell like that manually, and the second way is using the average function. Now, one thing is, how do you get this 1 over here to be subscripted? Okay, well, it goes like this. So let me take that 1, you'd highlight it. You come up here to the font, and there's a expand. Expand it, and then you get more things. And notice I put subscript on it, and that's how you do it. And then it's not going to show subscripted in the formula bar, but it'll show subscripted down into the sheet. So remember, if you want to change the way a letter looks or something, you go up here to the font. If what's in here, you know, what's naturally shown isn't there, then you can just expand that out. Okay? So do your averages that two ways. Canadian to US, once again, you're going to use a named cell up here, so make sure you do that. Copy your formulas in. The lighting, just quickly, I want you to use named variables in all these formulas down here. Okay. And then lastly, this one here. So I am going to, now on this sheet, for calculating these, in the paid column, you're going to need to use an if statement. Okay, and let me show you why. All right, so let's say someone says, okay, the plan for your cell phone says we'll give you 300 free minutes. So obviously, if you plan or do use 500, then you subtract the 300 and you get 200 minutes. Okay, now if all I did in this cell was say, okay, I'm just going to take equals how many minutes I use minus how many I'm allowed, I get 200, right? And let's say that I only use 300 minutes, I'm 0. You say, hey, that sounds good. But now, let's say I use only 50 minutes, okay? I do something, my girlfriend breaks up with me. Well, not for me, my wife would divorce me. That's even worse. And now I don't talk to her on the phone anymore. So I go way down that month. Minus 250 minutes. Are you telling me that there's any plans that if you don't use the minutes, they actually let you get money back? I don't think so. This would be a great thing. But if you're the company doing this, you're not going to want it like this. So if you don't use all your minutes, you want this paid to go to 0. Just like on an unlimited plan, we're just going to put 0 in, because if you got unlimited, you're never going to pay for anything. All right, but on this one here, we have to use what's known as an if statement, and you can see the formula out here. So we're going to make an if. All right, so I do if. Now, let's say you don't know anything about if, okay? So you do equal, I'll hit the function, and I have if down here, okay? So let's see what it says. It says if there's a logical test, and then a value if true and a value if false. Okay, so let's dissect this. So the logical test is going to be, we want to take this, okay, so how many minutes you used, and we're going to subtract how many you're allowed, okay? Now, true means that, well, let's do, so it's going to be that minus that. If that's greater than, whoops, I need to put greater than or equal to, So greater than or equal. I just have greater. Well, it doesn't really matter. I'll just make it just greater. If that's greater than 0, okay, now right now it says it's false. Okay, so if I use more minutes than I'm allowed, then I want the value I pay for to just simply be the C6 minus D6. Okay? But if I don't use all my minutes and this value comes out negative, which would be false, then I want to use what value? Well, if you said 0, give yourself a pat on the back. Okay? So you got the test. I want to see if I've used more than my allotted minutes. If I have, I just subtract how many I used minus how many I'm allowed. But if I don't use all my minutes, I just pay for 0. Okay? So down in this paid column, and I just copied this down, that's the type of thing that you're going to be doing. All right, I think that's it for this first movie on homework. I hope it helps. Okay, I'll see you on the next movie in Chapter 2. Can't wait.